Today I'm gonna use every single white art supply that I own, so wish me luck! Hello everyone! So by now you have probably seen a bunch of these videos where artists use all of their supplies in one specific color and make art with them. I have done it once before with metallic supplies, which was a challenge. But I haven't really seen anyone doing this challenge yet with white supplies, and maybe there's a reason for that, we'll see. And of course, since I'm using white supplies, I can't really use white paper, so I will draw on this black paper from Dale Rowney. And you might think that white is just white and it will look the same, but there is actually a bunch of different white tones too that can go from cooler to warmer tones. And here you can also see that some whites are more transparent or more opaque, and there is a bunch of different textures that you can get from different supplies. I have everything from pencils, dry and oil pastels, paint markers, gel pens, watercolors and acrylic, and so on. I am really glad I did these swatches, so I will know exactly what I got to work with. So since I'm using black paper, I'm gonna take that to my advantage and create a night scene, and then create the environment and the character with the white supply, obviously. So when I was thinking about what to draw, I immediately came to think about a ghost, because ghosts are white, I suppose, and they're usually out in the nighttime. So I am drawing a ghost witch cat. What else? It is heavily inspired by the ghost witch I made for Inktober last year. So the first white supply I used was the Koh-i-Noor chalk pencil to transfer the sketch to the paper. A light board doesn't really work that well with darker paper, I know this, so I scribbled with the white chalk on the back of the sketch, and then I placed it on top of the black paper, and then I very carefully traced the lines, and voila, the lines have been transferred. Next I'm using a Faber-Castell Polychromos Pencil to fill in the sketch a bit better, and for some reason it is so satisfying drawing with white on black. It just looks so nice and crisp. And I will be moving the supplies from my left side to my right side once I've used them once, so that I and you will know what supplies I've used and what I have left to work with. And also in this way I can plan out how I will use the supplies a bit better. Then next I'm moving on to the tubed watercolors. I will show you them in the order I'm using them, starting with Arteza, then M. Graham, and lastly Sennelier. I'm using all the watercolors basically as a base for the dress, since I can make them more translucent because they're watercolors and I can dilute them. So I will start with a thinner, more transparent layer and then build up the contrast or the intensity of the white, I suppose. I don't want everything to be intense, opaque white. I want the different textures and the paper peeking through and creating different shades or tones of white. And then I'm using the Liquitex Heavy Body Acrylic Paint to color, or I don't know if you color anything with white, but I used it to paint the moon with. I want it to be very opaque, and this paint is so nice and creamy. Next up I'm using the panned watercolors, starting with the Gansai Tambi huge pan, and then the Prima Confections, and lastly the Windsor Newton Coatman watercolors. The Gansai Tambi paint is so amazing, it is very opaque, so I used it to add in some more highlights, I suppose, on her dress. It is actually a bit confusing, to be honest. Since I'm using a white pencil to draw the lines with, I automatically want want to draw the shadows with that pencil too. Like inside her hat, for example, the part closest to her head should be darker, but I went in with the white to shade, which I would have done normally if I was drawing on white paper with a dark pencil. Then I would make the shading with the pencil, and if I was doing an inverted color challenge, making the shadows with a white pencil would be the correct way to do it, since when inverting the colors, the light will become dark and the dark will become light. But that is not what I'm doing here. It is a bit confusing, so I'm just trying to do my very best to leave the parts that is supposed to be shaded alone and focus on the lighter part and just let the darkness of the paper create the shadows. And next supply is a Prismacolor Premier pencil, and I used it to fill in the branches in the background and make them a little more detailed. Then I'm moving in with a watercolor pencil, starting with a Faber-Castell one, and then the Arteza woodless pencil, and lastly the Staedtler aquarellable pencil. The watercolor pencils were really nice to go in with and create just a little subtle hint of white, like a mist kind of. The Stabilo pencil is very opaque, so I used it to do some even more layering on her dress. And next I'm using the Acrylic pastel crayon, and this part I was very excited about. I used the pastel to create the shine around the moon, so I just drew around it and then I smudged the pastel around, and it looks so nice. It really looks like the moon is glowing. I will do the same thing with the lantern, but since I'm moving my hand all over the area where the lantern is, I'm saving it for later so I won't smudge it all with my hand. And I'm also adding a little bit of pastel to the sky here and there, and then I'm using my eraser to make some streaks so it looks like darker clouds, which adds a little bit of depth to the artwork and the whole scene. Then I'm moving on to the Daler-Rowney FW acrylic ink, which I used to add in some more, you guessed it, highlights. Many of these supplies looks very similar, so it is a bit hard sometimes to find a good spot to add them to without overworking the drawing. Next I'm using the Arteza gouache. I really liked using the gouache. It showed up so well on this black paper, and the lines look so soft and it blends nicely. I love the cartoony style it gave the lantern and the mushrooms. Then we have the Gallery Oil Pastel, and I actually dreaded this one a little. It has a very special bumpy, rough kind of texture to it compared to the other supplies, but I used it to add to the shine around the moon and also later to the shine around the lantern, and it actually turned out better than I expected. It brought more life and texture to the sky, I think. Sometimes being forced to use certain supplies can actually be good. You might discover new things. And then we have all them gel pens, and starting with the Uniball Signo, which is my personal favorite. And when first adding the gel pen to fill in the lines in the cat's face, I thought it looked really bad because everything else in the drawing has a very soft, natural texture to it, and the gel pens are very opaque and bold. So the lines looked a bit harsh at first, but after adding some more of the gel pens to the drawing, it didn't look that bad actually. And next I'm going in with the Amsterdam acrylic marker, which I used to add some more shape to the moon and just some minor details here and there. And next up is the Posca Markers. I have one with a finer point and one with just a normal bullet nib point. And I was a bit nervous to use these Posca pens because when I swatched them before, they just spewed out the ink everywhere and left these ink blobs. But it went with no accidents, as you can see, so I am grateful for that. The bigger Posca pen I used to add thicker outlines around the whole character just to separate it even more from the background and to tie it together a bit more. Then we have something similar to the Posca pens, the Pilot Pinter paint markers, which I used to add even more details with. The thicker pen I used to create the lace on the dress. It looks more like pearls at this stage, but I will fix that later. And next we have the Pentel correction pen, which isn't really an art supply, but it is white. And this one is crazy opaque, so I used it to fill in the moon a bit more and also to add in some more bolder highlights. This pen smells terrible though, but it is very satisfying to draw with. The ink just flows out very thick and smoothly. Next I tried using the Sakura Pen Touch paint marker, but it didn't work at all. It just made these paint blobs on the scrap paper when I tried to pump out the ink, and then it just refused to leave any ink behind when I wanted to draw with it. And then moving on to the Windsor and Newton acrylic paint that I forgot to show the camera, but oh well. I used it to try to smooth out the harsher lines that the correction pen made, and I also tried to give the dress a bit more textures. It almost has this spiderweb kind of feeling to it now, which I think is very fitting for a ghost witch. Then finally the last supply, the Schminky Lino print paint. I honestly had no idea where to put this. This paint has a bit of a oily feeling to it, so I just used it to add some extra contrast to the lower corners of the drawing, and that's it. But I'm not done yet. Now when I know I have used every single art supply, I will go back and just use them at random and try to add and fix some details and just finish up the whole piece. Also, I want to ask you guys, do you prefer when I walk you through every step of the drawing process like this? I usually don't do that as much anymore, and maybe it is more interesting just talking about the art in general and my thoughts behind it, and perhaps talk about another topic and maybe not so much in depth as this one. I don't know, I just wanted to try it this time, so let me know what you think. I'm not gonna lie, I am so amazed on how well this piece turned out, way better than I imagined. I never thought you could get so much variety with white supplies only, but it wasn't super easy since you had to kinda think backwards with the shading and all, but it is probably the most fun I've had with an art challenge in a long time, and I want to make even more art on black paper now. And I also love how this ghost witch looks. The white on black really looks like it is glowing, and the black paper showing through also makes it look like it is kind of see-through, like a real ghost. And yeah, ghosts are real. I really wish I had an interesting backstory for this character, but unfortunately storytelling is not my strongest side. So if you have any ideas for a backstory for this lady, I would super enjoy reading them down in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed this challenge and the drawing. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're new here, and I will see you next time. Keep drawing, my happy cats. Bye!